Okay, let's dive into this. 700 million. According to a 2011 study, somewhere between the 13th and 14th centuries, a colossal amount of carbon dioxide was just mysteriously removed from the Earth's atmosphere. We are talking about 700 million tons. To put that into perspective for you, that is more than twice as much carbon as the entire United Kingdom produces in a whole year today. It's massive.
So, you gotta ask yourself, right? What caused this massive climate shift? Try to imagine what could possibly trigger a sudden global drop in atmospheric carbon hundreds of years before modern technology or carbon capture machines even existed. I mean, there's no way it was just a newly discovered atmospheric phenomenon. Actually, the dark truth? It was caused by one single human being.
That's right, it was Genghis Khan. When his marauding Mongol horde swept across Asia, it was directly responsible for the deaths of a staggering 40 million people. Let that sink in. That was over 10% of the entire global population at the time. All of that, well, wanton slaughter, left vast areas of previously deforested, cultivated land completely empty. So the forests grew back, and they locked away enough carbon to measurably reduce atmospheric CO2 and essentially cool the planet. It's an incredibly dark fact, but altering a planet's climate just by conquering, that's pretty staggering. So how did the man responsible for this rise to such unimaginable power? It's time to look at his absolutely incredible rags-to-riches story.
Section 1. The boy named Temujin and his mysterious origins. Now, to understand the conqueror, we really have to understand these mysterious origins. See, the Mongols had no writing system at the time, so almost everything we know about his early life comes from a single, unverified text called The Secret History of the Mongols. Let's walk through this rather harrowing timeline. Legend says he was born in 1162, literally clutching a blood clot in his fist, which, was a supposed omen of a mighty warrior. Born to a chieftain, his life completely shattered at age 8 when his father was poisoned by a rival clan. His own tribe, the Taichuds, just abandoned Temujin and his family to starve on the unforgiving Mongolian steppe. They survived by eating whatever they could find, roots, fish, but as you can imagine, this harsh environment bred a harsh boy. At just 14, after a dispute over their meager food supply, Temujin ambushed and murdered his own older half-brother in cold blood. By 15, his growing reputation was making his old tribe pretty nervous. They captured him, locked him in a wooden board, but Temujin actually managed to smash the board over a guard's head and escaped right into the night.
And his early adult life, well, it was just as turbulent. He married his childhood betrothed Bertay and cleverly regifted a prized black sable cloak to an old warlord named Togrul just to secure a powerful alliance. And he definitely needed it. Soon after, his camp was attacked by the Merkit tribe, who kidnapped his new bride. Calling in that favor with Togrul, Temujin and his allies raised 40,000 men and utterly crushed the Merkits to get Bertay back. But peace? Yeah, it didn't last. A rivalry with his childhood best friend, Jamuka, turned incredibly bitter. The two clashed, and against all expectations, Temujin was soundly defeated. I mean, he was beaten so badly that he completely disappeared from the historical record for 8 long years.
Section 2. Rise of the Universal Ruler, a Vengeful Return. Let's move to and see how this builds.
Because when Temujin returned to the steppe in 1195, he was a different beast entirely. He had somehow raised a completely new army. And he wasn't just looking to defeat rival tribes anymore. He was looking to utterly annihilate them to prevent any chance of future revenge. But it wasn't just his ruthlessness that set him apart, it was his brilliant restructuring of society. You see, traditional Mongol society was deeply class-based. Nobles got the best roles and, of course, the lion's share of the loot. Temujin flipped this entirely on its head. He built a revolutionary meritocracy. He promoted men purely on their ability, not their birthright. And he divided the spoils of war equally among everyone, taking no more for himself than he gave his lowest soldier. It was a real game changer.
And this brilliantly illustrates the power of that system. Let's look at Subutai. Born the son of a lowly blacksmith, Subutai would have been, quite frankly, a nobody in traditional Mongol society. But under Temujin's meritocracy, he rose to become arguably the greatest military strategist in history. Seriously, he's credited with conquering more territory than any other commander, ever. This wildly progressive promotion policy won Temujin fierce loyalty from the common man, even as the traditional nobles totally rebelled against it.
So the final hurdle to uniting all the Mongols was his old frenemy, Jamuka. Now, Jamuka had proven himself to be a brutally harsh ruler, at one point literally boiling 70 of Temujin's men alive. No way you come back from that. This sheer cruelty actually drove his own generals to defect right over to Temujin. So Temujin wins a decisive victory, and by 1206, the scattered tribes of the steppe were finally united. To honor this massive achievement, he was given a brand new title, Genghis or Genghis Khan. Most scholars translate this to mean simply universal ruler.
Section 3. The Mongol War Machine. An unstoppable force.
With the steppe totally united, the newly minted universal ruler looked outwards. Now, the Mongol horde is often pictured in movies as this overwhelming tidal wave of men, right? But the truth is, they were almost always massively outnumbered. They didn't win because they were bigger. They won because they were infinitely better organized. Just look at these logistical advantages. Unlike traditional armies that relied on slow, super vulnerable supply lines, the Mongols were basically self-sufficient hunter-gatherers. They literally had zero supply lines to attack. They just lived off the land in their herds. When they were crossing the vast Gobi Desert to attack Western Shah, they survived by drinking their horse's milk. And in desperate times, well, they'd carefully open a vein on their horse and drink the blood, a wild survival practice we could call equine vampirism. I know it sounds crazy, but it made them the most mobile and flexible army on Earth.
But, mobility doesn't exactly break down giant stone walls. When they invaded the Jin dynasty, they were heavily outnumbered, by some counts like 8-1, and they faced these massive fortified cities. So Subutai engineered a totally genius, albeit chaotic, strategy. Step 1, they completely ignored the walled cities at first and absolutely annihilated the undefended countryside. Step 2, this sent a massive flood of panicked refugees fleeing straight into the walled cities, which totally choked their food supplies and created absolute chaos. Step 3, they recruited enemy siege engineers. It was brilliant. Fighting them was literally like fighting angry smoke.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that their true military superpower was actually their willingness to learn from the people they conquered. Nomads don't naturally know how to build siege weapons, right? So Genghis Khan actively recruited those captured Jin siege engineers to teach his army how to build the catapults needed to break down Jin walls. They adopted a written language from the Uyghurs. They took gunpowder from the Chinese. They just constantly absorbed the absolute best strengths of the people they defeated.
But man, if you crossed him, the results were practically apocalyptic. Take 1218, for example. Genghis sent a peaceful, incredibly wealthy trade caravan to the neighboring Khwarezmian Empire. But the local governor, totally blinded by greed, seized all the goods and murdered the merchants. When Genghis sent diplomats to demand answers, the Shah murdered them too. Huge mistake. Genghis Khan dropped literally everything he was doing. This wasn't just a war of expansion anymore. It was pure, unadulterated revenge. The Mongols swept in, killing an estimated 15 million people. And as for that greedy governor, yeah, he was executed by having molten silver poured directly into his eyes and ears. Brutal.
Section 4. A complex, lasting legacy. The world after Genghis.
In 1227, Genghis Khan died. The exact cause is actually still a bit of a mystery. Some folks say he fell from a horse, while modern scholars suspect it might have been the bubonic plague. But while the man died, his empire, it was really just getting started. 9 million. At its peak, under his descendants, the Mongol Empire covered over 9 million square miles. That is almost 2.5 times the size of Europe. To this day, it was and remains the largest contiguous, interconnected land empire in the history of the entire world. And honestly, the human scale is just as staggering. Think about the breakdown here. A full 25%, that is 1/4 of all humans alive on the planet at that time, lived under the rule of the Mongol Empire. 1/4 of the globe, all united by a man who, let's remember, was abandoned to starve to death on the freezing steppe when he was just an 8-year-old boy. So the crucial point is this wild juxtaposition. Right beside the unimaginable bloodshed, Genghis Khan implemented policies that were centuries ahead of their time. He established secure international trade across the Silk Road, finally connecting the East and West. He built an entire society on genuine meritocracy, and incredibly, he enforced strict freedom of religion. Actually, when he conquered the Karakatay Empire, entire cities surrendered to him willingly just because he liberated the local Muslims from religious persecution. It leaves us with a really deep contradiction. As the saying goes, every villain is a hero to someone. In the West, he is largely remembered as this bloodthirsty warlord, a truly genocidal force of nature. But to others, he is a visionary statesman, a revolutionary leader who smashed rigid class systems and quite literally connected the globe. The truth, as always, is a deeply uncomfortable shade of gray.
Which brings us to our final thought. How should history judge a man who built the very foundations of the interconnected modern world, but did so through unimaginable bloodshed? It's a heavy question about how we measure historical greatness, and it's one that history is still struggling to answer 800 years later. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. And remember, keep questioning everything you know about the past.